Hello! I continue to be totally psyched about this latest challenge, the 30-day story challenge, where I'm writing for the Dog Save the King anthology. In fact, I'm so excited that we're just going to jump right into it. So let's write. During the last video, I discussed my ideas for the main character, which is Nipper. All right, this episode, I'm going to talk about the secondary character, which is the Queen, that Nipper is going to be helping. So these are both very important characters to the story. It's almost difficult to decide which one should have been the main character. But me being who I am, I decided to go with the dog because that would be so different. As I've worked on the characters, so much of the rest of the story has developed. I think you'll be amazed to see what the work on the characterization does for the story as a whole. So we're going to kind of jump right into that. My second character is a royal person that is required by the anthology for the story. So the story wants a dog and a royal person. So this is going to be a queen, a young queen. And the first thing I wanted to come up with is the name. Now there's a couple ways to go about coming up with names for characters. I mean, you could just select any name if you want, and that's fine. But I like to have my names be more involved. I like them to have a meaning for the story overall. So one method is to grab the character naming book, which hopefully I'll put here or here, and I look through the names, and I have an idea of what kind of a character that I want that to be. So, and kind of a background. So for this, I would probably pick names from the English, Scottish, Irish, because for me, because of my own ancestry and everything, when I think royalty, I think in those regions. So look through those countries for names that might mean whatever I want my character to represent. So for this character, I might pick, I don't know, a rebel, because she's going to be a rebellious character. And then I would go through all the Irish and Scottish and English names and find ones that feel appropriate and then pick one. And that way, as I'm writing, it feels like I've put a little extra energy into the character because that name represents it. In my Battlemental stories, my main character is named Chase. So Chase, he is the champion for the air battlementals. And so he's adventurous, kind of flighty, acts before he thinks. I mean, so those are all very appropriate for the traits that are associated with air. And so the name Chase fits that very well. Chase implies him either going after someone or someone going after him, but implies movement and implies action. And that seemed very appropriate. I was happy with that name choice. So that's the kind of thing that you can do. However, the other method that I often use is George Lucas talked about this, and he named Darth Vader. So what he did, though, is he originally had the idea that this was a dark invader, and he manipulated the sounds and the letters and everything and came up with Darth Vader. So it is very much there. I mean, if you know that it's meant to be Dark Invader, you can see that connection. And, you know, Darth Vader has always been a great name, so George Lucas did a great job with that. So I'm going to do the same thing. My secondary character has psionics. I've already determined that in the pre-writing stage. And what those psionics allow her to do is interface with smart machines. So basically anything with a computer, she can connect with it. And in those machines, those computers have lower security ratings. If their defense systems for hacking and everything are low enough, she can order those machines to do what she wants. So for me, that makes her the machine queen. So that's the phrase I'm going to go with, where Darth Vader was where Darth Vader was the Dark Invader, this is going to be the Machine Queen. So I played around with how to do that, and I have Magine. So that is Maghine. That looks different. It looks science fiction-y. It looks like it might be a real name, and it rhymes with machine. So that was easy enough. Then the second name, I started with maybe Supreme. So Magine, and I wasn't sure. And I started playing with combinations and sounds and everything, and I came across Viking, because that kind of rhymes. And I'm like, well, I don't want that to be obvious, but I loved it. And so I moved those letters around, and it became Kaveen. So she is Magine Kaveen, and I spell Kaveen differently, but it has that rhyming quality to it. So that was great. Now I have a name for her, and it fits that same sort of thing where you turn Dark Invader into Darth Vader. What this also does is it gives me more background. It gives me more to work with on the story, because as soon as I thought Viking, my mind goes to corporate raiders. And since this is a story world where the royalty and corporations are blended together, corporate raiders have a whole new meaning than they do in our world. We're not talking about lawyers going into a courtroom, businessmen, buying stocks. We're probably talking actual swords and guns and raiding parties of a real type, forcing another royal house or another company to submit. So it gives me some exciting prospects for a story world based on this kind of stuff. And with the Kaveens being well-known corporate raiders, a royal house that thrives on that kind of business strategy, that kind of royal identity, country identity, this helps me with the storyline. Whereas I wasn't quite sure, now I am. So Magine's father is from this long line of corporate raiders. They're not well liked. And Magine has left because she doesn't want to be part of that culture. She's against it. She's rebelling against it. So she has left all of that behind in an effort to do research. And of course, that research led to Nipper. She's been doing genetic manipulation for reasons I haven't quite revealed in the story, but will be noble reasons. And this brings me to the first plot point. So Magine has struck out on her own because she does not agree with her father's politics. She's gone out to be able to do research, and of course that research has resulted in Nipper. That's the end result of the research she's been doing so far. But then I also thought about where did this ability, the psionic ability, came from, and that must be from her mother's side. So her mother's side, the royal family of her mother's side, they tend to be scientists. They tend to be very brilliant scientifically. So they're always at the high end of technology, cutting-edge technology. They're the ones who come up with the new ideas and implement it. They're always ahead of the curve of all the other royal families, which makes them dangerous and makes them an obvious target for the corporate raider that is Magine's father. All right, so now I have some great conflict. I have a lot of questions. I can have a lot of twists that I can throw into stories set in the story world, because already those two families, even though they have been merged through marriage, they don't like each other. They're probably working against each other. I'm sure there's a lot of politics, royal politics, that go on behind the scenes because nobody's happy with this merger except Magine's father. He's happy because he's got the scientist. He's got the tech now. He is definitely in the lead, and he is a dangerous person, possibly the most dangerous person in the story universe. So for him, he's where he wants to be. Everyone else, not so much. So I've helped develop my world story setting, and with tons of potential coming from the potential conflict between all the sides there. So there's so many possibilities for stories that I can pull from this setting. And as what happens most of the time when I write, plot possibilities happen as I develop characters and as I develop setting, as I develop the world. I mean, all these things, this almost pre-writing. Now, like I said, in the last episode, I don't consider this pre-writing because I'm actually doing the creation portion of it. But all of these add to my plot. Everything I come up with, I can see a way to turn that into a story. I see a way for conflict to be introduced, and that's what we want in stories is conflict. So, I mean, I just really want to hope and you see the value of taking the time to develop characters and to develop your story world. And from there, the story possibilities should just naturally flow. As I've mentioned before, the beginning of a story should have who, where, when, what, and why. Those are the elements that are going to give us the base of the story that we can move forward from. We've explored the who for the most part. We have Nipper and we have McGeen. So those are two main characters. We're probably going to include McGeen's father, possibly her mother, and definitely some agents that work for the family. Maybe some agents from other royal corporations will involve with it too. So I know most of the who's that are going to show up, those are it. I mean, I might have an incidental character that shows up for whatever reason, but those are going to be the main ones I'm going to be dealing with. The when and where will kind of be developed as I go along. And I know that as I move forward, I'm going to have needs of descriptions and terms and phrases and concepts that will all help solidify the when and where. And so I'm just going to leave that to develop as I write. But what I do want to focus on at this point is the what. What is going on? Well, what is that agents are looking to capture McGeen? Now, she's going to think that it's her father. Or maybe she doesn't know at all. She just knows people are after her. And it could be a ton of different people. There's a lot of options there because her father's the corporate raider. Her mother's side are tech geniuses. Anyone could want to kidnap her for ransom, or there's just so many possibilities. So the what is someone's after her. All right. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about 3-act structure on this. So a 3-act structure, most longer stories kind of follow this. And you have the first act, which tends to be in a novel length or in a movie. That tends to be the first quarter of a story. Then you have Act 2, which tends to be about half the story. And then you have Act 3, which is the final quarter of the story. At the end of Act 1 and at the end of Act 2, there should be a change. Something in the story should send it moving in a different direction. All right, so in this case, McGeen will be fleeing agents. She doesn't know who these agents work for. And so that change will come at the end of Act 1, where McGeen discovers that it is her father's agents that are looking for her. Or at least those are the ones that are going to capture her. They have her pinned. All right. And then as soon as I have that, I know what I'm going to do for the twist at the end of Act 2. So it's not that her father's agents want to capture her. They want to capture Nipper. So that'll be the kind of thing in the story. You're going along, revelation changes how the story proceeds. Another revelation changes the story again. It keeps the reader's interest up because they weren't maybe necessarily expecting that, especially if you write it so that McGeen doesn't suspect that it's her father. Why would her father come after her? He could just send an invite for her to return home. So this is should be surprising. At least I'm going to write it so it seems like a surprise. So that gives me the end idea for Act 1, the end idea for Act 2, and then, if best, you want to end the story with a twist. So I'll need to find a way to turn the tables on her father. That I don't have yet. I'm going to wait until I write more of the story and I get closer to the end, and then I'll know where that possibility lies and what McGee and specifically Nipper can do to thwart her father's plans. All right, so this is short story. This is first time I'm exploring on this channel. How long, how large, how many words should I be writing for the beginning? And I'm not suggesting that you do that. But for me, I'd like to have kind of a set goal of how large the story should be. And then I know if I'm writing too much or if I'm not writing enough, I can make adjustments as I go. However, if you are a newer writer, don't do that. I'm only going through this to give more of an idea of a concept of how much story can fit in the beginning, how much can fit in the middle, and how much can fit in the end. So the call for submissions has said stories under 17,000 words. That's a pretty robust story. The story that I submitted for previous publications with Hemelein Publications. All right, I mentioned the 3-act structure really, to explain the twist, but also because I want to give an idea of how large, how big your beginning of story should be. As a beginning writer, I don't suggest that you try to set any goals or standards for it. Just focus on the story first. Once you start getting more comfortable, then you can do what I do. And I do kind of establish a length that I want the beginning, the middle, the end. So for this story, our 30-day challenge has kind of asked that we work with 20 pages by the end of the month. So in that scenario, 5 pages would be the beginning, 10 pages would be the middle, and the last 5 pages would be the end. So give you an idea of where that falls. And then that kind of helps me, and like I said, this is just for me, that helps me pace myself as I'm writing. So I'm looking to write 5 pages as the beginning for my story. Now to compare that, 5 pages, that would be, to compare that to what the requirements are, 17,000 words should basically boil down to 40 plus pages. Previously, I've submitted stories for anthologies for this publisher, and those were 22 pages long and 13 pages long. So me going with a 20-page goal falls right in the middle of what I've already submitted for them. And like I said, it fits with the challenge, and so that's what I'm gonna work for. Will I make it? Yeah, probably not. I'll probably come in a little higher or a little bit lower, but that is my goal. I have written more of the story between episodes because I wanted to focus on the end, or how to wrap up the beginning, how to kind of move it from being the beginning and setting it up for the middle of the story. So that's what I'm going to do with what I write today. What I've written in the meantime, that would have been good for a discussion on description from a dog's point of view, and to show you how that can be a challenge, and it's different from writing descriptions from a different character's point of view, and that writing descriptions is part of the characterization process. Each character will notice different details. They will react to it differently. So that is characterization as you're writing. I could also be talking about how I introduce McGee's psionics into the story. You can see how that element is slid in there, as well as how to talk about Nipper's portal teleportation ability. Up to this point, McGee and Nipper have been chased by agents of one of the other royal corporations, and they are not sure which group is chasing them. So this is what I've written. They ran to the far side of the building and then outside. Broken machines, furniture, and bits of the building were piled against the walls. The smells were old. This was not a place where people visited often. McGee continued to run. She panted hard. Nipper realized that her human needed to rest. A man stepped out from a door, blocking their way. He was big and had no smell. More men came out of the building behind Nipper. They smelled of plastic. They were covered in plastic clothes. Nipper growled at the plastic men. "Your Highness," said the big man. He touched his head, and the glass bubble that covered his face disappeared. "Good thing I remember your fascination with the number 3. Nipper knew the smell of this man. He worked for McGee's father. The plastic and glass bubbles had prevented Nipper from smelling them as soon as she left the building. "Sir Draven," said McGee, "how is the king these days?" "Concerned about you," said Draven. "You're fortunate we found you before the other agents. Before the agents of the other houses did. Did you know that no less than 5 of the royal corporations have an interest in forcing a meeting with you? The results of which undoubtedly would not be to your liking." Nipper growled again to remind the big human that she protected McGee. "The dog's grown," said Draven. "She's unusually large for her breed." "Her name is Nipper," said McGee, her arms held stiffly at her side, her hands at her hips. She pointed to the ground, then did it again with more force. "There'll be none of that," warned Draven, pulling out a pistol. "Don't try to signal the dog again, or we'll have to shoot poor Nipper." "Nipper is one of a kind," shouted McGee. "She represents a significant breakthrough in genetics. Even my father is unlikely to condone the loss of such a magnificent animal, and she is my friend." "Then don't try to signal her again," Sir Draven said with a wicked grin. Nipper looked up at McGee, held tilted to one side. She gave a soft whimper. Nipper did not want to leave her human. Pointing to the ground with authority meant that McGee wanted Nipper to escape. Stay or obey. Nipper knew that dogs like her stayed with their humans. McGee would be angry if Nipper disobeyed. McGee flinched. Her finger jabbed towards the ground twice. Draven swung his arm to point the gun from Nipper to McGee. He shouted, "Shoot the dog." Door, roof, thought Nipper. The air blurred in front of her before she saw the roof of a building. She jumped through. Nipper heard the soft puffs behind her, a groan, and the sound of a small body falling to the ground, a body too small to belong to any of the agents. Did you see how I surprised the readers with that? Not only are agents of another corporation after her, so was her father. I want to leave them with a lot of questions. Why are the other royal corporations after her? Why is her father after her? And is she safe from her father? I also want the reader to be a little bit off balance. McGee has ordered Nipper to escape. Hopefully the reader's going to be questioning why she would do that. And what is Nipper going to do now? After all, Nipper is still a dog, a smart dog, a big dog, and a dog with the ability to open portals between places and move through them. But what is one dog going to do against a whole group of agents, especially the agents that know her? I especially like that her father's agent, Sir Draven, knows McGee well enough to be able to set a trap, to use the fact that other royal houses are chasing her, that teams of agents are after her and have driven her right into the open arms of her father's agent. So the story has taken an obvious turn in a different directions, and that's good. If this were a longer story, if this were a novel, this would be a cliffhanger ending for the chapter, and it would compel my readers to continue reading. Now, because this is a short story, they're going to read anyways because they're only like about 5 pages in, and I'm sure that they're not tired of the story, so they're going to read. But this, as a chapter end, definitely ensures that my readers go on. And I have to say that I get calls from my friends or angry texts where they're like, I don't appreciate that you kept me up past my bedtime because I had to keep reading your story. That's the kind of angry readers you want. Trust me. This is a good place to stop. Next episode, we are going to be talking about middles, the middle of your story, and that's the fun part of the story to write, because that's where all the really good stuff belongs, all the super action or jokes or whatever. So the things that you see in movie trailers are bits from the middle of the story. At least normally they are. All right. So what about you? Did you get your who? Did you get your where, when, what, and why? If you did, please share it with us. Leave a comment. Let us know what it is. Who's your who? At least give me that. Who is your story about? And who is opposing them? Give me a couple of those. Give me an idea of some characters there, and let's talk about that. All right. Until next time, later.